Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
She's got so much knowledge, and it's not just medical, even though she is a doctor, board certified, but she's also somebody who's very in tune with holistic medicine. And her name is Vitra Gosine, and she joins us again. Vitra, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Steve. How are you?
Doing very well, very well. You are an endocrinologist. Do I have that right?
Yes, you're correct.
Yes, that's one part of your life. And then the other part of your life, you are the owner and medical director of LOTUS Life, which is the Center for Holistic Healing. I mean, literally, both practices are next to each other in the building that you're in right now down there in Florida. And if anybody wants to check you out, find out more, mylotus.life is the website. Today, we are going to dig deep into the connection between your mind and your body when it comes to your health and healing, and also promoting issues with your health and how this is all connected to this. It is a strong connection, isn't it, Vitra?
Yes, it is. And the thing is that this is something that ancient cultures around the world, doesn't matter where you're from, knew intuitively. The only thing we're doing now, just so you know, there's nothing new under the sun. Advanced medical science and research is just now barely scratching the surface and, discovering. All we're doing is now we're actually getting the how of the mechanism of how the mind, meaning when I use the word mind, I really mean thoughts and emotions, which, then lead to our behaviors, choices, things like that, how the mind affects the body in terms of health and disease processes. So there's definitely a connection. For the last over 30 something years, especially, we've had significant medical research coming out in this area.
Why has it taken so long for those connections to be made?
So I think it has to do, I may ruffle some feathers here, with the scientific method, okay? So that serves a great purpose. There are a lot of great medical technologies and advancements. There's no doubt about it that we're living and benefiting from the scientific method, from our randomized, double-blinded, controlled clinical trials and science, and it's great. However, it's limited. And the reason is that it took a while before, there are people who started to understand and feel intuitively that, listen, the scientific method and all our scientific ways of measuring things, because, we don't believe that something exists unless we can see it, feel it, touch it, with the five senses. But whether we realize it or not, there's more to our physical existence than meets the eye and these five senses. So now we're able to, through these, many years, we're able to see these connections because we're realizing that our method of evaluating disease and illness is actually inadequate, meaning that it does not, just the purely biological model of, whether you call it medicine, health, disease, whatever it is insufficient to explain why things occur the way they do. It doesn't always fit. So it's more of a biopsychosocial, and I would like to add spiritual. I think we cannot, and not many people want to be bold enough to make this statement because they're afraid that their medical peers would, it's, oh my God, you're going there. Yes, I am going there. It has to be biopsychosocial, and I will add spiritual. We cannot separate spirituality from medicine, period.
Interesting. And that's coming from a doctor. So that's very interesting.
Yes.
Let's talk about the connection between the mind and the body and how it can promote disease and health issues.
So we've noticed a link. There is a clear link between, say, for example, the two types of diseases that are most obvious in establishing this link is cancer and autoimmune conditions. So I'm not trying, let me just, some disclaimers. I'm not saying that because of your mood and who you are, you've caused your cancer to happen. That's not what I'm saying. It is a significant predisposing factor physiologically, and I'll explain the physiology behind it, as well as autoimmune conditions. Autoimmune conditions are conditions, put simply, where your body, cells of your body attacks itself, different parts of the body. So for example, rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune condition, lupus, multiple sclerosis, there's an autoimmune, there's certain types of diabetes that are autoimmune. So we can, those are the types of things we're looking at. Thyroid disease, certain Hashimoto's, Graves' disease. I see this myself clinically when it comes to these things in terms of autoimmune thyroid disease. One of the questions that I always ask my patients is, has there been, you can have a predisposition for developing autoimmune conditions, for example. That's where the biology and the genetics and all of it comes in. But you can have a predisposition biologically to develop a disease, but you may not actually develop it if the internal, meaning thought and emotions, as well as external environment, don't push you into that particular area. I've asked them many times, in all patients, has there been any major psychosocial, personal stressor in your life within the last 1 to 3 years? 100% of the time, not 99.9, the answer is yes. So I'm not saying that this is the only cause of this. So this is how this works. The part of the brain that deals with thoughts and emotions, like let's start with emotions. For example, feeling depressed, lonely, angry. Those are some of the emotions. Loneliness especially. Loneliness, remember, you can be around a lot of people, have a lot of likes on Facebook, even be physically around a lot of people. But unless you can actually share your heart and soul with someone, that is connection. So I'm not talking about, people who are, just, plain simple, don't have people around. You need to have connection. We're biologically wired for connection. There's a part of the brain, the limbic system, the amygdala, hippocampus, those are the sort of emotion part of the brain. That communicates with another part of the brain called the hypothalamus. And that part of the brain really controls the master gland or pituitary gland. And that gland then controls all the rest of the glands in the body, for example. So they are actually bi-directional pathways, meaning pathways that go from the mind or the brain to the body. And then we talk about the gut microbiome. You've heard that a lot, right? The gut, that it's sort of like its own nervous system in a way. It's a kind of cellular intelligence that then communicates and actually affects, now we're thinking things like dementia, cancer, autoimmune conditions, all of that. So there are a lot of connections. There's a lot of circuitry and cellular neurochemical messengers that go back and forth from the mind to the body to the mind, meaning brain, that is, and the parts of the brain that affect thoughts and emotions. We've noticed a link between, for example, depression, loneliness, sadness, disconnection, and cancer. Also the same thing with autoimmune conditions. Type A personalities who are hard on themselves, who feel that they cannot authentically be themselves. They have to suppress and repress. And some of these things, I want to add trauma, either in childhood or in adult. And trauma is not necessarily what happens to you, but is what you feel inside in response to what happens to you. Because trauma to one person may not be to another. It's very subjective, right? So we notice a lot of those folks, there's clear links between these personality types in terms of the way we respond to our stresses in life and development of cancer, autoimmune conditions. And if you think about it, autoimmune conditions is the body attacking itself, different tissues. We are actually our harshest critic. When we sort of attack our own selves, the people who feel guilt and fear and shame, who feel that they do not have, they can't somehow, society and our culture has taught us to, have that stiff upper lip and we're supposed to suck it all in and no, we're human. It's okay to be, we're afraid to be weak or vulnerable. These are emotions that are critically important to human survival. And we need to have the courage to be authentic because our very life and health depends on it.
So what I'm hearing from you, Vitra, is that if you're predisposed, let's say genetically, to a disease, you might not get it, but if you have issues, whatever those issues might be, psychologically, depression, loneliness, dealing with a trauma, that could exasperate or bring out that disease.
Yes, it basically what it does, it also depresses your immune system function. So if you think about with cancer, we have natural killer cells. They're actually called natural killer cells, NK cells, okay, for example, among many other immune system, cells. And many other type of immune system cells. And their job is not only to be the army of the body to protect against viruses, bacteria, the usual infections,
Sure.
but also they detect when there are abnormal cells growth. Is your body constantly goes through a natural turnover of cells to be healthy, to grow, to develop, to maintain its functions. So it detects which cells are abnormal, which cells are overgrowing, and they kill those cells. They get rid of them. When we are depressed, we're sick, we're also sleep deprived. We're, those thoughts, emotions, even traumas, they affect or suppresses our immune system. And one really important note here is it increases the stress hormone levels, cortisol and adrenaline. And those levels, people who are under chronic stress in very difficult situations, whether it's a bad marriage, bad relationship, toxic work environment, whatever, you name it, they are under chronically elevated, or they live with chronically elevated stress hormone levels. Those stress hormone levels can actually alter and affect the brain. It can affect your DNA in terms of telomeres. Telomeres are sort of the ends of chromosomes that as we get older, they sort of shrink. So people living under those conditions or with that state of mind, emotion and thoughts and emotions, they're actually older in a sense than their biological age. Okay. So basically the mechanism is really stress, meaning whether it's depression, anxiety, loneliness, whatever you want to call it, trauma, affecting that part of the brain that controls the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system function. And that is how it weakens our immune system in a way that actually predisposes and increases stress hormone levels. It can predispose us to especially conditions like different types of cancers and autoimmune conditions, and many more conditions. Cortisol level increase, belly fat, predispose you to diabetes, cardiovascular disease. The list is endless. But you see the connection. We have established those relationships as a fact, as a medical fact. These are not sort of disputed, we know this for sure.
Couple of quick thoughts on that.
Yes.
Perfect example would be an ulcer. I went through it 5 years ago. And why? Because I was going through a lot of stress, but that's an example of this controlling your stomach and then everything else. And I want to share a quick story with you. How the mind-body connection can also help heal you. And I know this is going to sound kind of crazy, but I probably about 7 years ago, I was up in my attic in the garage, and I was get some boogie boards down, and I fell, and I rode the stairs all the way down, and I hit the garage floor concrete. Fortunately, it didn't hit my head, but my leg hit it, my foot hit it. And I got a plantar's wart from that impact. Very bizarre, but that's what happened. So I went to the podiatrist, and he tried to, work with it and, different treatments, and it wasn't going away. And I'm like, well, what do I do now? And he says to me, will it to go away? In your mind, tell it to go away. I'm like, okay, whatever you say. I will tell you 3 days later, as I was thinking of it, please go away. You're, troublesome, blah, blah. It went away. And so, he was telling me the mind connection, and I went along with it, but it actually worked.
So there are literal, when I say this, there are actual pathways, anatomic pathways that are bidirectional from the brain to the rest of the body, all the cells, and chemical messengers from the cells all the way back to the brain. You made an important point. The positive is also true. So people say, so how do I sort of, decrease my propensity to, develop these kinds of things? Well, again, we live in a culture where we're constantly bombarded with sensory input, for example, always distracted, the phone's going off, this is happening, that's happening. And we're constantly all over. I would recommend the sort of, I don't like to use this word mindfulness because it's actually not using the mind. It's actually the opposite. It's about resting in being, just simply to be. You can start from the most physical, the most basic, which is attention to the body, So for example, start becoming aware. It's developing an awareness or consciousness of your breathing. Start with how fast you're breathing. Suddenly, when you turn your attention to that, you naturally slow that down. Pay attention to your heart rate. Pay attention to if you're standing outside and you feel wind on your face, feel it, pay attention to it. What you're looking at, if you're eating something, it's not gobbling this up quickly so you can get to the next thing. In other words, practice being in the here and now. That slowly over time, and believe me, it does take practice because everything around us, our work environment, home environment, school environment, you name it, our entertainment, everything is geared toward the opposite, taking you out, not that inward thing. So if you start in terms of dealing with, this is how you can become aware. That's the first step to awareness. Why is that the first step? Because that's the first step to really processing and understanding what thoughts you really have and what emotions you really feel. Depression, for example, can be anger turned the other way. Okay. How are things or something that might have happened in your childhood, in a relationship, in something deep inside that you wanted to express, but you didn't because you have to be sort of the nice person. We have the nice person syndrome. Those are the people who actually develop a lot of times autoimmune disease. I'm not saying that is there are not other contributing factors, but we see it, the link at least. So this is how
I want to jump in with what you
Mhm.
just said because it ties into a question that we just got. Kira is in Teaneck, New Jersey on our instant feedback line, instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. She says, can a childhood trauma affect your health as an adult?
Yes, it definitely can. And this is exactly, in fact, I kind of didn't, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about that, but actually in a lot of ways. So sometimes most of the times, if we have not actually recognized that, acknowledged it, be honest with ourselves and process it, we may have automatic reactions to things. So for example, abandonment, for example, as a child, an abandonment doesn't mean, oh, well, a parent just leaves. I'm saying you can perceive that even if it's for a few weeks as an infant, there are very strong bonding mechanisms, like our need to attach, not unhealthy attachment, but healthy attachment, and our need to be authentic, okay? And our need to be, I use the word boundless, but it means sort of the ultimate freedom for our spirit, whatever you want to call that, okay? And when these things are disrupted at any point in your life, especially in childhood, you may have automatic responses in relationships or, with people, for example, or perception. And also you may be carrying certain emotions. This is the part to directly answer the listener's question that can affect you later on. You may have shame, which there may be nothing that no fault of your own. It may be someone else's fault, responsibility, the reason why something happened, but you blame yourself.
Sure.
It may be guilt, fear of abandonment. There's so many things, and all those things internalized manifest themselves. They cause the release of stress hormones, of what I call a milieu of neurochemical, substances that is constantly bathing the cells in the brain and in the body. And how do you think that manifests itself as disease? This is where the medical profession is really, really lacking. That is why I developed, Lotus Life, because we need to address this. Unless we cannot sweep. Western medicine does not consider consciousness, and the basis is on health and disease and pathology.
You know
Our
what?
natural
It's
our
just,
natural state is wellness and well-being, not that.
it's horrible that that's
Yes.
ignored based on what we're saying. And, you know, I visualize a block diagram. So as a child, and it's been proven scientifically that what we encountered as a child between 0 and 7 really does
Yes.
start the course for our adult life. But if you looked at it from what you're saying, and I'm understanding it as a block diagram, here's a childhood trauma. Let's say your parents got divorced when you were very young, and you have a feeling of abandonment. Maybe you're aware of it or not. Now the block diagram goes to, we get further along in life in relationships, and there's issues with relationships, which brings on stress, but you don't know that it goes back to the beginning there. And then that stress releases chemicals, and now that turns into potential health issues, disease issues, and things like that.
Especially cancer, autoimmune disease, and many other things as a result. I just use cancer and autoimmune because
Sure.
we have some of the strongest evidence for that. We have
Yep.
strong evidence for all of it. And that is correct. So this is why one of the most important tool they can teach from kindergarten, I would say even before that, believe it or not, even at that age, the ability to not just turn the attention and awareness outward, but to turn it inward. Because unless we have or develop a sense of what's going on inside, you ever notice, God forbid, our system and our culture is such that if you have a death of a loved one in a family, okay, I know there's this, bereavement leave, all of that. We're expected to deal with it, come back in and function like nothing has happened. You've just suffered a major heart-wrenching trauma that we have to process this, so we have this expectation that we just snap out of it and it doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. And so what do? We have to suppress this because, well, I can't afford to get sick, or I can't afford to do this, because what about the people who have to work, even if they're caretakers to their family members or doing other things, but they can't stop because they're taking care of everyone else. And by the way, caretakers as well. And by the way, medical professionals like myself are at highest risk for these types of things, whether it's psychological or whether it's physical, whether it's
Right.
cancer. My group is it. And if you're actually, I'm like in the highest category because I take care of my elderly mom as well. So, these are the kinds of things that we really need to, and I'm a single mom to my teenage kids. So there we go, the level. So I recognize this as well on a personal level. And that's where there are times I take a step back because I know the potential effects of some of these things.
Yeah.
So we need to really be cognizant of this.
I think it's something that we all kind of think about, but we don't
Yes.
really talk about. And you're 100% right. When you have a major situation, let's say the death of a loved one, deal with it. You got a week off, whatever it might be. And I call it like the bucket. And that's, you keep filling your bucket up. You keep putting stuff in there and just suppressing it. And then eventually the bucket's going to overflow. What's it going to
Yes.
overflow with? You're going to have, psychological, emotional issues at that
Yes.
point. Like I don't want to say, but you crack, it's just like, I can't
Yes,
deal
yes,
anymore. Or what we're talking about today, the mind-body connection manifests itself into health issues. And you're so on point, Vitra, about.
So I just want to say one on a positive note. So to protect yourself as much as you can, when I talk about meditation, I think we had talked about the fact that meditation doesn't have to be the traditional, you're sitting cross-legged. It could be just relaxing, taking a walk and listening to music, wherever you feel you can exhale, you can connect, you can feel yourself. Pay attention to the body. It always brings you back to now. More than anything else, make sure that whatever relationships you have, it's okay if it's better to have one or two people you can truly share your heart and soul with. Non-judgmental, just completely authentically being yourself. Social media is great and it's wonderful, but they're not your friends. They're not, just so you know that.
Yeah. I mean, you could have a few friends that really
Yes.
care, but the rest, let's be honest, they don't. And it's
more than anything else, when you're meeting up with your friends, see them in person,
absolutely. And what a difference that makes. And
Yes.
we're just about out of time, but it was so powerful in what you said and so simple in just being present, taking time to get off your phone, social media, everything else, go for a walk. I know it sounds ridiculous. I never do. And I'm wrong. And I did it this morning. And I took my dog and I just walked.
Wow.
And I got to tell you, as we're talking about it, I was like, that actually felt pretty good.
I was about to say it does feel good. And there are days I need to give myself my own advice because, we get caught up in things.
You get caught up and you forget how beneficial it is just taking 15, 20 minutes out of your day to do basically nothing, just block out the noise and everything else and just be within yourself, because then you start realizing things, and maybe some of these things, maybe some of the, call them traumas, issues, stressors, whatever they might be, may be easier to deal with.
Can I leave you with one quick thought?
Please.
And that is, if you listen to a beautiful piece of music, okay? It's not just the notes that make the music. It's the pauses and rests in between. If you look at a sheet of music, life is very much the same way. And that's what we need to do.
I'm not going to say anything after that, except thank you so much. I subscribe to what you're saying. Always great to have you on. And now I crystally clear, I can't even say that, know why you open up Lotus Life, because it's taking care of the other side of it, energy healing and things like that, which are so beneficial that we're all missing. MyLotus.life is the website, and looking forward to getting together next time with you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.